Hi, this is Rachel Ann Goodman with KSQD KSQT Radio, community radio for the Monterey Bay Area. I just recently wrapped up the winter quarter at UC Santa Cruz teaching a storytelling class. If you've ever heard the Moth Radio Hour or any personal stories like that on the radio, you know how impactful and powerful they can be. This group of 18 to 23-year-olds really delved into their personal stories, crafted them, and told them in front of a class of 23 students. It was brave. It was also very personal, and I would love to present some of these stories to you. This first one is by a student who has experienced lots of trauma in her life and also found that religion, not religion per se, but understanding spirituality was a path forward from a very troubling childhood. Here's her story.
Kick, Eileen, kick. As I hear my team chanting to me during high school, I'm racing my 5K. I see a very, very steep hill ahead of me. In front of me, as I look up, there is this big hill that we call Bambi, aka the Killer Hill. And in my mind, these thoughts just kept replaying. I can't do it. I can't do it. My legs are burning. My heart is pounding. I'm gasping for air. I can't do it. But something that my coach had told me came right into my head. He had told me before I joined the cross country team, Eileen, I see potential in you and I want you to be the future of the girls program. At that time, I was attending a brand new high school, first graduating class, my junior year. And at that time, we didn't have a cross country team. We didn't have a girls team, but we only had a boys team. So for a year, I was the only girl on the team running with 10 boys. And so there was constant doubt in my mind that I believed that I was not good enough for this sport. I believed that I was not fast enough for this sport. But my coach kept encouraging me to pursue, and that I will accomplish my goals. And so my constant doubt and my constant potential were in a battlefield of who's gonna win. And maybe it's because during that time I was struggling with so much anxiety and depression of everything I went through in my life, reflecting on the past traumas that I carried, of my innocence being taken away from me as a child, and broken relationships, my family's brokenness as a low-income family with immigrant parents. They were never home, so encouragement was never present at home. My responsibility as an older daughter and the only daughter was to take care of my two younger brothers. And so cross country was my escape. It was the area where I can run to be in peace, but the doubt was still always there, including the pain. But something had shifted. Something that had changed my life shifted into my heart. My coach always had this motto that he would remind us: faster runners, better people. And during that time, I didn't feel like a good person because of the mistakes I had done, the constant guilt, the constant shame that I carried from my mistakes. I had told myself that these mistakes defined who I was. And the constant harsh words people will tell me at school because of these mistakes followed me everywhere I go. But faster runners, better people. I asked my coach, how can I be a better person? And he became my mentor. And during that time, my faith has also been growing. I got to learn a little bit more about who Jesus is and what his character is. And through that, I was able to acknowledge what my identity is, and that all the mistakes I have carried, all of the pain I had carried was forgiven and washed away. I was transformed. My mentality, my thought processing had changed into a transformation of a new life. And thanks to Coach Nolan for the mentor he was, I was able to acknowledge that the mistakes I had carried, the traumas that I had carried, the pain that I had carried did not define me. But every time I had a race, every time I encountered Bambi, I reminded myself, Philippians 1:13, I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. It was a constant shout in my heart to keep pushing forward. And so now I remind myself that even though there's mountains in life, I remind myself that at the top of that mountain, there will be glory, there will be a beautiful view. And now every time I face mountains in life, I remind myself that it is okay and that I'm gonna get there step by step because he strengthens me. And so even though life is unfair and even though life can be hard sometimes, every time I encounter Bambi in my life, I remind myself that even though as I walk in the shadow of darkness, I will fear no evil, for you are with me. Your rod, your staff will comfort me everywhere I go. Thank you.
Just as that student found solace in her faith, this next story explores how politics and religion can intersect in uncomfortable ways for students whose family members might be trans or gay. And that is exactly what this student explores in the next story here on K-Squid.
I've been religious during various points of my life, but there was one event that solidified my eventual rejection of it. When I was starting high school, everybody was new at the new place and wanted to make friends, and the best way to do that was to attend the local youth group because most of our small town was religious. Now, the only issue with this was that my parents were completely anti-church. This was because maybe 10-ish years prior, my brother had transitioned from female to male, and even though now he's completely medically transitioned and no one would ever be able to tell, back then, the church had told my parents that if my brother were to show up and be out as a trans person, that the people that were devoted to the church would leave, a lot of them. And the church could not afford to lose that much money. So that really upset my parents, and rightfully so. They abandoned organized religion and churches after that. They still maintained their faith, but decided to stay removed from the type of organization that discriminates against people like my brother. Now, I asked them to disregard this discrimination just for a bit so I could at least make some friends, and they reluctantly agreed to let me go. When I went to youth group, it was really awesome. I met a lot of really cool people, and as most Christians are on the surface, they were super kind and welcoming. I had a lot of fun, and I even got some people's phone numbers. Then it was time for the sermon, which the pastor gave, and it was actually really good, which I didn't expect. It was actually about being yourself. It was about how the devil will try to rob you of your happiness and of your sense of self and of your faith. And just like how the devil will do that, there are people who will try to do that to you too. They'll make fun of you or hurt you or put you against other people. They'll bully you for being different. And there's just going to be people who are just like the devil going to try to take from you. And even though people are going to target you because you're not how they think you should be, that doesn't matter, because God made you to be who you are, and no one else's opinion matters. Now, I thought that this sermon was really meaningful, especially because it seemed geared towards people who were different, like, for example, LGBT people. But I wasn't naive enough to forget what the church has said about my brother in the past. So I went up to Pastor Casey afterward to kind of see if these people really were who they said they were. He was holding a Bible where he was standing, and I came up to him. I was like, hey, my brother really wants to come to youth group. Now, this wasn't actually true, but I needed to use something to kind of introduce the topic, because I wasn't just going to go ask him about what he thought of gay people. So I said, my brother really wants to come, and he was so enthusiastic. He was like, yeah, dude, that's awesome. Totally bring him. And I was like, wait, but he's bisexual. Would he be able to come? Now, my brother's not bisexual, but I wanted to use a term that was a little bit less controversial to Christians, like transgender. So I decided to say bisexual just to make it easier. Now, when I said that, Pastor Casey's enthusiasm wasn't really there anymore. He said, well, I mean, your brother could come, but here, now he waved his Bible around like a weapon, here we go by the word of this. It's the same way as if an alcoholic came here. If an alcoholic came, we would want him to have the intention to change. We would want him to stop being an alcoholic. So the same is what we would do for people who are in the LGBT community. So I was polite, I didn't want to argue, and I left. I got the answer that I needed and the answer that I was expecting. Now, this was still sad because previously I hadn't seen any of the hate that my parents had experienced, but here it basically confirmed what my parents already knew, was that sources of organized religion, like churches, are not going to be supportive of people like my brother. And out of morbid curiosity, since I had only found out about bisexuality from this pastor, I decided to Google what this church specifically thought about trans people. So I did that, and sure enough, they described it as child mutilation and, among other hurtful things. And things like this are absolute propaganda, which reminds me of what the Trump regime is doing now. They use religion as a way to justify hate, which is also what that pastor did, even if he didn't feel hateful. In fact, people like that typically think that they're saying these things out of love, but it's really not. It's just a tactic of control. Now, the Trump regime is obviously under a lot of power right now, and you can see the indoctrination with so many people. And that's why my parents don't like organized religion, and that's why I also now don't like organized religion. I would have rejected it from that response whether or not I had a sibling in the LGBT community, because for me, it's not about my relations to those communities. It's about hate to anyone who's different. And any group that will hate people who are different for who they are is not a group I want to associate with. So this isn't about me being protective to my brother. He was just a really convenient way to bring up the conversation with that pastor. So yeah, I really don't want to align with a church like that, and I decided I would make friends in other places, and I didn't want friends who were part of that church because they knew the kind of beliefs that that place stood for. Now, the outcome of that is that my parents still have their faith. I particularly don't continue to have faith in any religion, but I also understand that I don't want to attack religion because there's a lot of beautiful things about that and about humanity and helping people and love. But I do want to criticize the way a lot of people choose to use religion as a way to control others and to justify their hate. And that's what creates people like that pastor who think they're doing the right thing, but really they're making hate out of something that's supposed to be all about love.
There are many ways to explore one's spirituality, and when you're young, you're trying to figure it all out. In this next story, we hear a beautiful story about celebrating the transition from childhood to womanhood in a community of women. Here's the next story all about getting your period and how that is dealt with in our culture or in subcultures that refuse to make it a medicalized problem, but something to celebrate instead.
So, talking about periods and other bodily functions in my family is always really normalized. We're really comfortable with that sort of thing. And so, when I got mine for the first time, it shouldn't have come as such a shock, but it did. I was sitting in the bathroom of the Natural History Museum, and I was looking down at my underwear just like confused. And I go home to my mom, and she told me that I had just started my period. It wasn't that big of a deal. And I was just kind of caught up in my head about it. Like, it just looked differently than I thought it would. And so I just had that kind of acceptance, and I was going through it in my mind. But then I kind of came to a sense of pride, just feeling like my body had recognized that I was responsible enough for womanhood and to go into this next step. And so I just kind of accepted it and thought it was kind of a gift in that way. I also got excited because I realized that this meant that I would now get to go through the ceremony at the Women's Herbal Symposium, which is one of my favorite places still to this day. The Women's Herbal Symposium is a really cool place that I've been going with my mom since I was 1 year old, and it's a women's gathering basically where people come together each year and they share herbalism and ancestral skills, and we get to learn all about basically like health and wellness, and it's a lot of fun. And so each year on the last day, they hold something called the maiden ceremony, where the young girls who have just started their periods get to come and basically just get celebrated for their transition into womanhood. So the girls who have not yet are called maidens, and then they become in the mother stage, and then once they've gone through menopause, they're called crones. And the crones are seen as the very wise figures, held with a lot of respect, and they do a lot of the organizing work in the community. And so the ceremony is basically just like, to sum it up, you come out and there's like 150 or so women dressed in red, holding hands in a circle and singing, basically, to bring in the maidens. And I promise it's not a cult as much as it really very much sounds like it is. I was not held against my will. I go very willingly every year and really enjoy myself, but I know it sounds like a cult. So I was really excited because this year, instead of on the outside circle with everyone else, I would leave my mom and I would go into the inner circle with the other girls in the ceremony. And so my mom was really excited too, and so she decided that we would go to the store together and I could pick out a dress that I wanted to wear for the ceremony. I tried on different ones and I ended up picking this nice blue one that had like a taper on the bottom, and it wasn't the normal red that the girls usually wear, but my mom said if I felt good in it, then that was the best choice. And so we got that, and the next day we set off to head to the symposium, and when we got there, we were going down the dirt strip, and I had my head stuck out her red Volkswagen Jetta, and I could just smell the warm spring air with the oak smell, and it just smelled like home to me. Such a comforting feeling. And so we went and we set up our tent that's kind of near the fire circle, and you could hear the river, and it just sounded so nice, and I just felt like I was back home in the place that I felt so comfortable and happy to be back. And so the next few days, my mom and I enjoyed doing all the fun things that Symposium has to offer. We took a workshop on how to make a herbal first aid kit, and we made flower pressing little contraptions, and we sang at night under the stars around the fire circle, and got to do a marketplace where women come together and they bring their homemade goods and stuff, and you can buy and trade things for all this stuff, and it's super fun. And so we just enjoyed ourselves, and on the last day it was finally time for the ceremony, and so I ran back to the camp and I got on my blue dress and I went to meet up with the other girls, led by Terry, who's kind of the master of ceremonies. She leads a lot in the community, and she leads the maiden ceremony. And so we all lined up together, and we could hear the women start singing from out in the field, and so we knew it was time to go. And we headed out to meet all of them, and I just felt this nervous excitement come over me. I was excited to be a part of the ceremony, but also nervous, just feeling like, was I ready to leave my childhood behind and go into this new phase of life? It just felt pretty daunting. But I just kept going, and I was guided by Terry, and we all headed out, and we came over the little hill, and we saw all the women just joyously singing, and it was so just beautiful to see. And so we came up to them, and they all kind of joined hands like this to make a tunnel for all of us to go through. And so me and the other girls went through the tunnel of arms, and you look up, and there's just this colorful lattice of arms over you with these women just smiling down and singing. And you'd kind of duck under the little girls whose arms were too short, and you'd look up at the joyful moms and the wild, wise crones at the end, just hooting and hollering. And I came to my mom, and she just was smiling through her tears and just seemed just really proud and excited for me. But once I saw her, I kind of felt more ready for the transition, and I didn't feel so scared for change, because change is always kind of something that scares me. And so I felt more ready for that once I saw her. And when we emerged at the end out of the tunnel, we made a circle in the middle, me and the other maidens and Terry, and she goes around the circle, and she wraps each girl in a red cloak and sprinkles them with river water, and then puts a little moon pendant around their neck to signify their transition. And she finally got to me, and all the anticipation had been building, and she sprinkled the water over my face, and I felt calm and grounded in the moment. And she wrapped me in the red cloak, and I just felt the embrace of all the women surrounding me. And she put the pendant around my neck, and I felt all the fear of change and everything that was happening just melt away, and I felt ready for this transition. And she said the words that I had just been waiting to hear, which was, "Welcome to womanhood." And I felt just excited and ready. And so after the ceremony, me and the other girls who had all done it together became fast friends. We bonded from the experience, and we swam in the river at night, and we danced together, and we stayed in touch after we left the symposium. And the next year we decided to meet up and all go to the ceremony to honor the next group of girls that would be going through the ceremony. And we joined hands and just cried together, so proud of the next group of girls, and felt so much empathy just knowing like what that experience was like now that we had gone through it. And as the last girl had the necklace of the moon pendant put around her neck, we all joyfully yelled in unison, "Welcome to womanhood."
I'm Rachel Ann Goodman, and the stories you're hearing this evening come from the Storytelling for Social Impact class that I taught recently at UC Santa Cruz. 23 students went through the class, and during that they produced 3 different stories. Some stories are lighthearted, and other ones hit hard. This one is the latter. This is the view from a young student who is experiencing the world as a trans woman, reading the news and seeing lots of violence happening around her. It's very blunt. There are passing mentions, but no graphic details of rape and murder.
I'm a student in Professor Rachel Goodman's UCSC Storytelling for Social Impact class. This is a story I wrote about being a transgender woman in America right now. I think it's kind of a weird story. This is what I said the first time I told it for a live audience, because it's very scary to me to be telling it, even though it's not about anything that happened to me, because I think that that's kind of one of the things that maybe living in society does to you by making you a part of demographics and communities, is it means that you have to be involved in things that happen to other people far away, and it's very taxing. Yeah. It's getting late, and you should be going to bed, but your laptop is open, your headphones are over one ear, and you're listening to CNN live coverage while you scroll social media, looking for every piece of information that you can find on the latest mass murderer. And even as you're doing it, even as you're building the profile in your head from every little piece of information you can find, you feel guilty for doing it. You hate yourself a little bit for doing it, and you feel guilty because you know that the only thing you should be feeling right now is sadness and empathy. You should feel simple, uncomplicated, unmitigated sadness for the people, for the children that are dead, and so you hate yourself for feeling in one tiny corner of your mind relief as every piece of information you find confirms what you suspected, that this murderer was white, cisgender, conservative, male, heterosexual, posted bigoted views about groups you and your friends are members of on social media. In short, that he was nothing like you, that he would have hated you. You feel guilt for that relief, but you know that that relief is inevitable, that you have to feel it, because you are a transgender woman in America, and you know that to the pundits and the voices and the powerful interests that control media and perception in your country, every crime is your crime until proven otherwise. Every act of violence, every deviation from the social order is a symptom of the ideology, the dangerous, treacherous ideology that your existence supposedly represents. Every crime is your crime, and every child that turns out like you is a terrible, failed disappointment. So when you confirm to yourself that if you were there, you too would have been killed, that he would have hated you too, and he would have hated your friends that have it so much worse than you because you are at least white and housed and have some savings, you feel relief because at least in all the other tragedies it is, this tragedy isn't another piece of evidence to indict you. You feel all that relief and you go to bed, and yet the next morning you wake up and all of your relief and all the guilt you felt for feeling it is pointless because you're still guilty, because maybe he wasn't a tranny like you, but they found evidence that his roommate was, or his friend, or his girlfriend, or his cousin's nephew's neighbor's daughter. Or maybe he had porn of people like you on his computer, or he talked to his friends about how it'd be fun to rape someone like you. And somehow that doesn't mean that you're a victim, that you have been objectified and humiliated and belittled yet again in the public eye. Because you can never be a victim. Somehow that too is proof that this murderer, this well-intentioned young white man with a promising future, only did what he did because he, like so many, had fallen victim to the treacherous ideology that you represent. And you want to have thoughts and prayers, but you feel guilty because you know that your thoughts and prayers aren't where they should be. You know that, like everybody else, on the news, in the places you go, your thoughts and prayers ought to be with the dead children, with their caretakers, with their loved ones. And they are. Of course they are. But you know in your heart of hearts that who you're really thinking of is the trans woman like you on Reddit you saw this morning. Her face falsely reported as the face of the murderer to police departments and news agencies in her area, which didn't correct their error for 24 hours and never bothered to apologize. Why are you so sorry for her? She's, like you, still alive, still housed, but now she's too terrified to leave her house. And they didn't even apologize, and nobody's thoughts and prayers are with her. And you don't want this feeling of anxiety, of terror, of the entire society you live in weighing down on you and indicting you personally for every wrong, for every failure. You don't want it to ruin your life. You don't want to be paranoid. You don't want to be afraid of every man you meet, as if nobody can really understand you the way you live. You don't want to turn against the people around you. But it's hard. You go to class, you go to work, people ask how you're doing, and you tell them that you're fine because you don't know how to begin narrating the guilt and the relief and the disappointment that's roiling inside of you together with the endless, endless grief. So you tell them you're fine, and you tell yourself privately that it's important to have hope and that everything will turn out to be okay. And you have to believe that, and so you do.
After that story was told in class to the 23 students listening, there was a pretty long silence of just people absorbing what they had heard. When people tell such personal stories in a small class setting, 23 students, there becomes a real bond between students because they're hearing parts of people's experience that they may never hear in casual conversation. The way people talk when their phone is in their hand and they're bantering in a light, airy way is quite different than a story that's carefully constructed, first written, and then delivered without notes. So people are not reading these stories. They are speaking them either from memory or from the heart. This next one is kind of a look backwards at what happened after COVID. Some of our students were trapped in their homes for months, and then when they came out into social settings, it was not an easy transition. This is one of my students who shared that experience with the class.
I'm going to try to tell this just from memory. Okay, so I hadn't realized how much the pandemic had changed my worldview until I went into a crowd for the first time since pandemic ended. And it was a really shocking experience. Basically, during pandemic, I was at home with my mom and my younger sister and my brother, but we all had our own rooms and we all didn't really interact too much. My younger siblings were in school, so they were kind of focusing on that, and I had just moved out of my dorm from UC Santa Cruz, so I was trying to focus on my mental health and heal and stuff and just take some time alone. So I was spending a lot of time, that was the first time in my life I'd ever spent that much time alone, and it felt like the perfect opportunity to do it because we were all supposed to be 6 feet apart. And my mom was working, she had her job that she was now doing remote, so everyone was just busy, basically. And I remember the advancement of the news saying first that we're gonna go on 1 month pandemic. And we all thought we were going to be back after a month, so we weren't really taking it seriously. And then in that month, it was another month, and then another month. And I think I got discouraged, and we all kind of got discouraged, but also kind of adapted with each month that came on. And I think whoever had the freedom to enjoy the privileges of getting a break from the constant flow of the capitalist world or whatever, I think we all tried to take advantage of that as well. But I remember one of the weirdest things to experience during pandemic was the closing down of grocery stores. At first, I couldn't even grasp my mind around the idea of movie theaters. Not being able to go to a movie theater, that seemed dystopian. But then it's everywhere you couldn't go. And then after a little bit, we could go, but we were wearing masks, and we were wearing masks very long into pandemic. And so by the time I had moved down to San Diego, some places were starting to be a little more lenient with not wearing masks. I had moved down to San Diego about a year and a few months into pandemic.
I had gotten a job offer at a coffee shop down there, and that's how I could tell that there was a shift in that things were starting to kind of pick up and go back to normal, was because there was just such a quick, my twin sister was working at this coffee shop and she was moving on to a different job, so her boss was like, "Can we hire your twin?" And I didn't even get interviewed or anything, and I also didn't live in San Diego, so I packed everything up, so it felt like things were going back to normal because I didn't even have to, let alone go through like regular job hiring procedures. I didn't have to go through any type of COVID-related, pandemic-related procedures of like getting a new job. And I think to me that also showed me that things might be a little bit different in San Diego, but I still wasn't anticipating how different it was going to feel when I got down there. And so I moved down there, and it was like 2 days before my 21st birthday, and it was also like a week before I was supposed to start at my new job. And within the first few days, my twin sister and her boyfriend, her main boyfriend, were like, because we lived on SDSU frat row, and so no one had like just a single partner, and they were like, "Let's go to the Ocean Beach Farmers Market," and I was like, "Yeah, that sounds so fun." I wasn't mentally preparing myself for this experience because I didn't think I needed to mentally prepare myself, because I just hadn't realized what COVID had done to me, basically. And before COVID, I was really social, and I'd always go to the Santa Cruz farmers markets, or just a lot of different types of events, always be around a lot of people. And I remember we parked a few streets away, and we're all like hitting the pen a lot because it's the farmers market, so there's going to be really good food, and we really wanted to enjoy the vibes down there. And eventually, I don't know if we hit the pen too much or if it was just the contrast of being in this crowd, but I remember hitting the crowd, getting into the crowd with her, and we're having to weave our way through the crowd because there's so many people and not a single person is wearing masks, and it was you're going shoulder to shoulder, like all touching each other, and I just got so aware of how how close we all were to each other and how weird it felt. And I think that's when everything had hit me of what pandemic had felt like, what this whole 6 feet apart mandate had felt like. The masks, everything, because with this whole 6 feet apart in masks, it's kind of saying like, we're all gross and we all shouldn't be near each other and we're all dangerous to each other. And so being in this crowd, it was kind of, it was like, I thought we were all dangerous to each other, and it just felt, it was a very surreal experience. And I started to kind of panic a little, and I was like, oh my God, Ellie, that's my twin sister. I was like, this is like, I haven't been in something like this since pandemic ended. Like, how are you guys not freaking out? Because I think that was part of it, was that San Diegans maybe had been a little bit more social, a little bit more kind of holding on to like culture and like outings and groups during pandemic, which I wasn't really in my hometown, because in my hometown's like a really lot of old people, and so we were all very like conscientious and cautious of that. Eventually she calmed me down, and we got some food, and I started to feel a little bit better. But I think it was really jarring getting confronted with what had changed for me during COVID, and I don't think that I yet have gone back to how I used to feel before pandemic. I think there's still a little bit of like a feeling or like a sentiment of like this, like, 6 feet apart, like let's all like energetically let's be 6 feet apart, but even at UC Santa Cruz. But I wanted to add that I did notice within this class, I really throughout the time felt like my walls coming down and like kind of all of our walls coming down. And so I think this is one of the instances where I really was starting to feel normal again, and part of it could be because I was in Rachel's class 2018 before COVID, and so there's that familiarity, and then just all of us getting vulnerable and comfortable with each other and stuff like that really helped with that. So yeah, that's it. Thank you.
I'm Rachel Ann Goodman, and these are stories from my Storytelling for Social Impact course at UC Santa Cruz. They asked to be anonymous, and so we're hearing their voices without their names attached. All stories, as memorized and remembered, are true to the extent the person could recreate them. This next story is about comparing our experiences in childhood and our resilience that we are often gifted from our parents and from our genetics, and then as we get older into more complex social situations, some of the skills we may have learned and the calluses we may have formed from various interactions as children don't stand us in as good stead when we're older. We have to develop whole new ways of coping with difficult social situations, and a very common one at UC Santa Cruz or any college is how to get along with your roommate.
In second grade, I went on the monkey bars every day. I was really good. I was so in my groove. And I built up these calluses on my hands, just roughened skin from just doing it so much. And I didn't really want to do like games, like play tag or like climb on top of the monkey bars. I kind of just wanted to get from one side to the other as fast as possible. And so I just needed to like maintain this momentum to make sure that, so I didn't fall because I was scared, but I was really stubborn, so I knew that I would get to the other side. Other people were less into this and being kind of like bossy and controlling as a kid. I would really hope other people would follow the rules that I put in place. And sometimes the traffic would get a little bad because it was like a bunch of 7-year-olds on the same set of monkey bars. And I would just really hope that they could somehow read my mind and be like, just go this way. Like, can't you see that it's dangerous otherwise? I built these rules for myself and just kind of hoped other people would naturally follow them. We would time ourselves, see how long we could hang on to the bars, and our hands would get sweaty and we would stop for a second, bring one hand down, wipe it off on our pants. I was so strong back then. I was in the best shape of my life. I was doing 3 sports, and my prepubescent body I had so much trust in it that I was able to do what I needed to get to the other side. I've always been kind of obsessive, hypercritical, insecure, and thin-skinned. Or at least as long as I've known myself. Apparently, before I was 5, all of that was more put into strong-willed and curious and eager, and school kind of changed that perspective for me a lot. I was really missing my calluses this winter quarter. I became pretty close friends with my roommate in the fall. This is my first year of college. Incorporated all of my roommates, like both my roommates, into my friend group, and after winter break, I was really excited to get to know her specifically because I thought she was so cool. And when we got back, I noticed that the energy was different. We went down to Eastfield, where there's this like structure for exercise right outside of the gym, and there's these like really tall monkey bars and wood chip ground, like a thing for like doing angled push-ups. And I was really remembering my calluses back then, these raised circles of thickened skin that could just get my palms through anything. The energy between us was different, but I didn't really want to admit that that was what was happening. I didn't want to admit that I had misjudged the situation, that she wasn't willing to take the kind of friendship I was offering, that I was taking things too far, too fast. Wanting to really know her became kind of the root of the problem, and I was once again just hoping that other people would naturally go along with my own made-up rules. I remember getting on those monkey bars and it hurt like hell, but I was really stubborn, so I knew I had to get it done. I'm still to this day incredibly stubborn. And instantly my hands were just feeling like they were being pulled out of their sockets, palms instantly sweaty, just raw aching palms, and the calluses that I'd built up all those years ago were very much lacking. This older body carrying so much more weight than it had before. A week after both me and my roommate went down to the field and hung out on those monkey bars, she told me that she didn't really want to be my friend anymore. And I was really upset. I was very hurt. My heart rubbed raw the same way as my red monkey bar beat up palms. I missed the calluses on my hands, but now I wish that I had grown some over my heart, that I could tolerate this kind of fracture, that I could trust in my body the same way to bounce me back from something like this. And now, the part that really hurts the most isn't the wound itself, but all of it growing back as my ego slowly stitches itself back together.
You're listening to the K-Squid Radio Hour, stories from UC Santa Cruz students in my storytelling class. I'm Rachel Ann Goodman. The world of TikTok may not be familiar to all of us, but I learned a lot hearing this story from a student who sought to become popular through TikTok and maybe even reach influencer status. The whole world of trying to up your numbers has become an obsession for some people. And as we chart our status through our jobs, through our dollars in our pocketbooks, and through our likes, this becomes ever more of a problem. Listen in.
It was September 5th, and I would post my first ever video to TikTok after waiting 2 weeks. People are scary, guys. Anyways, I originally had a YouTube channel, and it was a good creative outlet for me. I even met a lot of online friends through there, so I was hoping I'd do the same with TikTok, and I wanted to try it out because it was more short form. So there I was in my car with a strawberry lemonade boba in hand. I was going to do my first ever video on the way Charlie Kirk drank his coffee. Now, I would have you guys guess how many takes it took me to, post the video, but honestly, I lost track and I ended up drinking 2/3 of the drink before actually getting to posting a mediocre take, but it was fine because the 17-year-old me, he was proud of himself. And so I posted it, and I had a certain rule in mind for myself. For every 10 views I got for a video, I would need to substitute it with 1 like, basically. This is what I called the golden ratio. So I posted, and I waited, and it hit like a maximum of 200 views, and which wasn't bad, honestly. I was really proud of myself. And it even hit the golden ratio as well. However, that ratio would soon, implant itself into my mind as I began to post more and more videos on this platform. Cut to October, and I finally started to get more and more traction. More specifically, on a video about my residential advisor calling me a twink during our meeting. What's a twink, am I right? Anyways, that was my, one of my favorite videos to create, and it was one of the first to hit 5,000 views. I was feeling really proud of myself, and I had even met a couple people on my floor through that, and even a close friend through this. So why isn't it that I couldn't just be completely satisfied with everything I had at the moment? Well, they say comparison is the thief of joy, and if that's the truth, then I'm constantly being mugged by this guy with red headphones. He had 7,000 followers, and he started around the same time as me. How am I supposed to compete with that? I saw him around a lot, so he was a constant reminder that I needed to step up my game. I wasn't going to sulk too much about this. So I decided to work more on my performances. And by that, I started prioritizing how well everything looked, like my presentation, like how well my voice lines were recorded, how well the camera angles looked, the lighting, how well my hair looked. I mean, I'm very particular about how it looks sometimes. But then that started to spiral a couple questions I began to ask about myself, like, am I really being authentic towards the camera? And like, I'm trying to form this perfect version of myself, but is it really perfect if it's underneath all these circumstances, like I'm, applying to get like the approval of other people? It's just, I didn't have time to think about that, because in January, I had another video blow up. It was of me walking through a forest talking about a scandal that happened in the bathroom. There was a straight couple that was having sex in the stall next to me. And you know what? That video did exceptionally well. I hit 72,000 views on it, and I had actually reached my 500 follower mark. And I was really happy about that. But that victory was very short-lived, honestly. I started to realize that, in the 4 months I started doing my TikTok thing, I had only reached half of my goal. I was only 500 out of 1,000 followers, so I was not super proud of that. In February, I honestly just fell behind a lot. It was probably the worst month for me growth-wise because I just didn't have anything in mind to post. I needed a wild card. I needed to figure out something to post. And what do people love more than, bathroom scandals? People drama. I was going to give them something to work with. So I pulled out my camera and started talking about a recent rejection I had faced. Surprisingly, it did a lot better than I thought. I knew it would break the couple thousand view marker, but I didn't think it'd reach 20,000, honestly. And with that, I'd actually reached my 1,000 follower goal, and I hit this on March 2nd. So I hit this within the 6 months I had started my account, and I was really proud of myself. And now it's time to move towards the 10K goal. So thank you all for watching. Love you all. Bye-bye. Nope, I'm not done. Okay, cameras off? Great. As much as I'd like to say that I reached 1,000, I can't help but feel unsatisfied with the work that I've done so far. Was it because the red headphones guy still had more followers than me? Was it because I thought I could do better? Or was it because I just really wanted people's approval? It was through crafting this story I began to realize how flawed, my want for growing this TikTok account was. And then I started to put together why I was trying to do this still, and it was numbers. It's always been a numbers game. I've always wanted to go higher and higher and higher, and I needed people's approval for that. The numbers have been controlling how I see this whole situation. The golden ratio basically determined how well I thought a video did, and sometimes I would just delete some that I liked making, but I just thought weren't that great. So now I'm sitting here trying to figure out how to end this on a good note. And I think part of solving a problem is acknowledging that it exists. I acknowledge that I have an obsession with numbers and people's approval. I need to figure out why I drank that boba so zestily in the first place. Thank you.
You've been listening to stories from the students in my UC Santa Cruz Storytelling for Social Impact class. I'm Rachel Ann Goodman. Thanks for tuning in this evening. It's been my pleasure presenting these, and I'll be teaching it again next year. Thanks so much for tuning in. This is Talk of the Bay on KSQD Santa Cruz, KSQT Prunedale.